Today, we're diving into one of history's most incredible figures, Marcus Aurelius. You've probably heard of him as the ideal philosopher king, but his real story? It's a massive paradox. And the private journal he left behind, the Meditations, is basically a timeless toolkit for getting through chaos. So let's get into how he did it.
This quote right here is the key to everything. It gets right to the heart of his entire philosophy. What Marcus was saying is that the quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of your thoughts. It's a wild idea when you think about it, that your inner world is the only thing you can truly 100% control. And mastering it, that's the whole game.
So, when we picture Marcus Aurelius, a pretty specific image pops into our heads, right? You know, the wise emperor, totally calm and collected, ruling with this perfect sense of justice and virtue. And honestly, he was basically groomed for this role from day one.
I mean, look at this resume. It's perfect. He came from a noble family. He was handpicked by the emperor before him because his character was just that good. And he was trained in Stoic philosophy by the best teachers around. He was known for living simply, not getting caught up in luxury or excess. By all accounts, he was literally the ideal person to lead the most powerful empire in the world. But the world he was about to inherit was anything but ideal.
Because the second Marcus took the throne, it felt like the empire just started to fall apart at the seams. That calm, serene image of the philosopher king was immediately put to the test by a reality that was, well, brutal, violent, and just absolutely relentless.
Just check out this timeline of his rule. Almost right away, he's hit with a massive war on the Eastern Front. Then, as his soldiers are coming home, they bring back a horrifying pandemic, the Antonine Plague, that just tears through the empire. While that's happening, a huge group of tribes invades from the north, kicking off wars that would last for most of his life. And, just in case that wasn't enough, in 175 AD, his most trusted, most decorated general, a guy he completely relied on, declares himself emperor, throwing the empire into a civil war. It was just one thing after another after another.
For pretty much his entire reign, he was at war. He was often out there on the front lines himself, commanding the legions from some cold, damp tent on the edge of the empire.
And all the while, this pandemic was so bad that at its peak, thousands of people were dying in the city of Rome every single day.
And on top of all that, he had to suffer the personal sting of being betrayed by Avidius Cassius, a man he had praised, a man who had trusted completely.
And to make it all worse, there was just immense personal tragedy. He lost his co-emperor, he lost his wife, and he lost almost all of his children. So this brings us to the big question, right? Faced with a world that is literally burning down around you, how does a person not just survive? How do you lead effectively? How do you keep your sanity, your sense of duty, when everything you know is collapsing?
His answer wasn't just hope or prayer or some kind of blind optimism. No, it was a practical, hands-on philosophy he'd been studying his whole life, Stoicism. For Marcus, this was not some boring academic subject. It was a psychological toolkit. It was a lifeline.
At its very core, Stoicism is all about finding inner peace by being super precise about where you put your energy. And the first, most important step is mastering something called the dichotomy of control, which is really just a fancy way of saying you have to understand the difference between what you can control and what you can't.
And this chart illustrates that idea perfectly. On the left, you've got the storm, the outside world, the wars, the plagues, the betrayals, all the stuff you absolutely cannot control. A Stoic just accepts that. But on the right, that's your inner world. That's your turf. And that's what you can control. Your judgments, your attitude, your actions. Here's the kicker. A Stoic wastes zero energy on the storm and puts 100% of their focus on building a rock-solid inner world.
So how do we know all this stuff? Well, because we have this incredible window into his mind. While he was out on the front lines of those northern wars, probably sitting in a military tent by candlelight, he wrote all of this down for himself. The book we now call the Meditations was his private journal, just a series of notes and reminders that he never ever intended for anyone else to read.
Okay, so let's put this to the test, the ultimate test, that betrayal by Avidius Cassius. Just imagine for a second, you hear that your best general, the guy you've put in charge of half the empire, has just stabbed you in the back. For most people, the rage, the fear, the urge for revenge, it would be totally overwhelming.
But Marcus didn't lash out. Instead, he turned inward and put his philosophy to work. He wrote this to himself as a reminder. He focused only on what he could control, his own character. He made the choice not to let another person's actions corrupt his own virtue. This is Stoicism in action, right here, under the most extreme pressure you can possibly imagine.
And he didn't just save these ideas for huge crises. He used them every single day. He had this little morning routine, a way to mentally prep for the day ahead. First, he'd tell himself, okay, today I'm going to meet meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, and dishonest people. But, and this is the genius part, he would then remind himself that these people only act that way because they don't know what's truly good or bad. He saw them not as enemies, but as family, as people who are fundamentally like him. He knew they couldn't actually harm his inner self, and that we are all born to work together, like a team. It's just this powerful exercise in empathy and resilience.
So why on earth are we still talking about the private journal of a Roman emperor 2,000 years later? Well, because the world is still chaotic. The challenges of war, disease, betrayal, and loss, they haven't gone anywhere. His tools are just as relevant today as they were back then. They're timeless. So, what are the big takeaways from the emperor? First, you can build a fortress inside your own mind that the outside world can't touch. You find your true power by focusing only on your own thoughts and actions. And remember, it's not the events themselves that hurt us, it's our opinion of them. Ultimately, true peace doesn't come from living in a peaceful world. It comes from having a disciplined mind.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. The man with arguably one of the most stressful jobs in human history found a way to be at peace. And he did it not by changing the world, but by changing his mind. So the question for us is, what could we accomplish if we use that same toolkit in our own lives?